Hey, Steve here, and welcome to this next episode of Processing Subscriber Images. This one that I've got for you today comes all the way from Scotland, from long-time subscriber Derek Bell-Jack. So thanks, Derek, for sending this one through. It's a really beautiful image with a lot of potential. And so, Derek expressed an issue, or expressed, in his notes along with this image, the fact that it was really difficult to capture the full dynamic range in one shot. So I don't think he mentioned in his notes that he used a grad filter, but from looking at the image as it is, I think that's what he's done here. And the main reason for thinking that is that we can see the difference in darkness or brightness between the very bottom edge here in the foreground and then the middle section here. And this is where I would assume that in order to capture the detail in the sky without it overexposing, there's a grad filter that's been used to darken the sky, and then that has kind of overlapped into this middle section here. So if that's Derek, if that's not exactly what happened, apologies, but that's what it looks like to me, just sort of from looking at the image as it is. So the first thing that we'll do basically to begin processing this is to kind of recover that balance between the foreground and the middle distance here with the main subject, the castle on the hill there. So we'll be brightening the foreground and darkening brightening the middle and darkening the foreground, just so that they look similar. So I'll be using, as usual with these episodes, I'll be using the luminosity masking panel to help me fast track some of the luminosity masking techniques that you can use to perform these kind of edits and adjustments. If you haven't got the panel yet, then there'll be a button below this video where you can click the button and go and download, whether you want to use credit card or PayPal. You can get the panel and install it for Photoshop. It works on CC, and there's a version that I've created specifically for CS5 and CS6. So you can do that if you haven't got the panel and you want to use these shortcuts that I'm going to show you. Otherwise, you can use these same techniques the manual way if you prefer using luminosity masking, using the techniques manually and creating the selections in the channels panel, as I teach in my luminosity masking course. The panel does help make everything quicker and easier to kind of get to grips with, so that's what I'll be using, because these videos, I'm trying to make them as quick as possible so they don't take up your whole day, but they do tend to run a bit long sometimes, so I'm trying to save as much time as I can by using the panel to show you these techniques so that you can get to grips with the kind of the ideas and what I'm trying to achieve, as well as seeing how it's done as well. So okay, let's kick off the main demonstration in this video. So the first thing I want to do, as I said, is start adjusting the brightness of this middle section. So what I need to do is first I'll create a selection that isolates the shadows so that I can then create a layer that's going to brighten only those shadows without brightening the already bright parts. So in the luminosity selection section of the panel, I'm going to have the previews turned on, and I'll just pick a number in the shadows and on the left hand side here of these numbers. Each one corresponds to how deep into the shadows we want to isolate. So 1 is not very deep, 5 is deepest shadows. Let's pick a 3 and just see what that shows. Okay, so that's a pretty decent isolation on the left, on the right hand side. On the left, not quite as isolated from the background, so let's see what a 4 looks like. It's a bit better. Okay, 5, that's pretty good. Let's just adjust this slightly. So we want to try and create a bit more isolation between the sea in the background and then the rocks here in the middle. So let's open the levels panel on this preview, and let's just increase that contrast. Let's just sort of tweak some of these sliders here just to try and make that stand out a little bit more. And I think that's a pretty good effort around about here. So I'll click OK to accept those changes, and now I'll click Use Mask. That's going to load the preview as a regular selection. So this is a luminosity selection. And now what we can use this with is just a regular brightening curve. So I'm going to come down to the light section of the panel, and I'm going to create a curve adjustment layer that's going to brighten the image. But with the selection active, when I press the button, it's going to load the selection as a layer mask. So let's hit that button now, and we can see we've got this new lightning curve 2, and that's basically just a regular curve pushed up a bit to brighten the image. So let's push that a little bit further, and we can see if I turn this layer off and on, we can see the difference that's making. So it's brightening the middle. It is also brightening some of the foreground that I don't really want to brighten. So what I'll do in this case is just take a black brush, and I don't really need the accuracy of a luminosity mask or a luminosity selection for this. I'm just going to brush with the black brush. I'll go 100% opacity, and I'm just going to brush to mask this lightening effect out of the very foreground here. The reason I don't need the accuracy of a luminosity selection is because we haven't got any edges similar to the tops of these buildings here, this castle, which really are going to be impossible to brush with a regular brush like I'm doing here just in the foreground, because the transition between what I'm brushing and what I don't want to brush is pretty it's pretty smooth here. So not sure if you can hear that, but yeah, I've just got my window open because it's a stinking hot day here in Sydney, and yeah, the late afternoon, the parrots are going crazy flying around, the cockatoos. So yeah, if you can hear weird screeching, that's what that is. So yeah, you have to excuse that. They're cute really. I mean, I sound like I'm moaning, but no, it's actually quite fun having them flying around and landing in the garden. Okay, so yeah, I'll just do the same thing up here in the sky. I don't really want to brighten the sky just yet, so just removing this from up here. Okay, let's have a look at that now. So yeah, that's a much more isolated adjustment. So just brightening the middle section. Let's see while we've got that going how far we can brighten it without it looking overdone. Okay, let's leave it there. Right, next let's just add another adjustment to darken the foreground a bit more, because it is still brighter than that middle section. We've got a shortcut here to a curve or a multiply darkening method that I use and teach. Let's just use the curve. So that's just a quick shortcut there for creating a curve that's going to darken the image. So let's just adjust that a slightly bit more. Alright, let's invert the mask, Command or Control I, and this time with a white brush. Just going to brush into the grass to darken it. And you know, just freehand, just until it looks of a similar brightness to the middle of the image here. Alright, now I think that's looking a lot more even. It's still quite dark and sort of dull at the moment, but let's just turn these two layers off and compare the before and after. So this is the original layer, and here this is kind of the evened out exposure. So if you're familiar with my 6-step workflow, I talk about the first step being evening out, actually the second step being evening out and the exposure. So you know, do everything you need to do, whether that's blending multiple exposures or doing what we're doing here, to basically start the bulk of the processing with a flat exposure. So yeah, that's a pretty good effort. I'm quite happy with that, considering it's taken us only a minute or two. I will just, I mean, I know that I said that I didn't want to brighten the sky just yet. I will just borrow some of this some of this lightening layer, lower opacity than that. And there's a reminder for my green slip. Tomorrow. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to brush, because this top left corner is a bit dark, so I'm just going to brush by hand, just so that's not quite so dark up there in the top left. Alright, I'm pretty happy with this, how this has gone so far. Okay, Okay, we can probably start to look at colour and contrast now. So let's have a look at colour first. I'll add a curves adjustment, and I just want to play with the reds and the blues just to see what happens when we adjust the amount of those colours that is in the image. So I'm just going to pull the blue curve down a little bit. That's making the foreground. You can see the before and after. You can see that this is before and this is after the adjustment. In the foreground especially, there really is a bit too much blue. So yeah, let's just leave it around about there. Let's see what happens with the green. If I reduce the green, it's going to make the shot look a bit more red without adjusting the actual red curve. So let's see. That sort of puts a bit of warmth into the foreground there now, and it just sets the sky a little bit more on fire. It's already a burning red sky, but yeah, I think this just sort of puts that warmth throughout the rest of the clouds as well. So I think that's quite nice. I think we'll leave that there, but yeah, this is more of a creative adjustment. You may or may not like this precise amount of tweaking. So you know, with your own shots, you can play with the red, green, and blue curves to your heart's content and just settle on a value that you like. Personally, for me, this is pretty good. So let's start looking at contrast adjustments. So again, in the panel, we have a contrast section here under the light section, where there's just a quick shortcut to my favorite levels adjustment for adding contrast. Again, you can edit this after the fact, but it's just giving us a quick shortcut. So what I think I'll do is just push this. So I just want to look at the foreground and grass really. So I know that I'm going to overexpose the sky, but just want to see how much we can make this foreground and middle pop. So yeah, that's quite a nice amount of detail there. I like that. So let's let's keep this, but now invert the mask, and we need to now brush into the mask with a white brush to reveal this effect. However, we need a luminosity selection, and what I think I'll do is actually reuse the one that we created. We'll reuse the layer mask that we used for the lightning curve down here. So just coming back to lightning curve 2. If I click in the panel up here, show mask, then that's going to give us a shortcut to show what this mask looks like. So, you know, from here we can decide whether we want to reuse this. The answer is yes. So I'm going to click load mask as selection, and that's basically loaded this now as a selection. I can come back up into this levels adjustment up here and brush through to reveal this adjustment within the bounds of that selection. So Command H. Now with that white brush, let's go 100% opacity just for speed. We can brush into here and bring that detail through. And then similarly down in the foreground, I just need to deselect the selection now, so Command D, because the selection didn't include the foreground in that lightning layer. So that's a good adjustment, and we can see there, because I had that selection active, it's restricted the brush strokes to within the building and the rocks, and hasn't gone over into the sky. So that's quite good. Let's now we've done that, let's see if we can just push it a little bit further, given that the mask is now active. Alright, that's good. I think we've probably brightened the foreground a little bit too much now. So let's just add another layer to just darken that foreground again. So use the darkening curve button from the panel, invert the mask, got a white brush. I haven't got a selection active, so I can just brush straight into here. So that looks pretty good. I think what I might like to do is actually use the leading line of this path and try and sort of bring it out a bit more. So to do that, I can either use a curves or levels adjustment to brighten things up a bit. So let's start with the levels adjustment, but let's set this back to 0. Oh, sorry, back to 1. And now let's brighten the image using the white point control point. Okay, now invert. Now with the white brush, let's go 30% opacity. Let's just brighten this middle section up here. Again, that's not the most subtle brush strokes, but yeah, I want to be as quick as I can in these videos. So there we go. I think that'll do. That's quite a nice adjustment. And I think one effect that I can apply to this now that will give a really nice effect would be the good old Orton effect. So again, I've got a button here that can shortcut that for you in the panel. You just click the Orton button, and that's going to create an Orton effect layer with a black layer mask. So we can either brush this in to the image using a white brush, or we can just invert the mask now and see what that looks like in full effect. It's a bit too heavy, so we can either reduce the opacity or mask it out of the shadows, because that's what's kind of yeah, that's where we've lost the most detail here. I might actually now just reduce the opacity of this brightening layer now that the Orton effect has done its job and kind of really enhanced that even more. Okay, let's mask this out of the shadows now. So let's load a shadow selection. I don't need a preview this time, so I'm just going to press 5 on the shadows. Hide the marching ants with a black brush now. Making sure to click on the actual layer mask, not the layer. We can just start brushing this out. Just to kind of make it more subtle and look less photoshopped, really. We can keep it dark at the top there in the sky. I think that's okay. And yeah, I think from here, yeah, I mean that's a nice amount of glow we've added. I think from here the rest of the workflow would essentially just look like me going around dodging and burning, adding some detail that way. I'll see if I can just, well, how long have we got? We've been recording 18 minutes. Try to keep these around the 20-minute mark. Maybe I'll just see if I can do some quick dodging and burning to show you the kind of thing that I would do next. Okay, so in the panel we've got finishers section, so that's got some dodge and burn tools under it, and also sharpening and cloud dramatizer. We won't use all of those right now, we'll just do some dodging and burning. So with the 50% grey button, what that's going to do is just give us a 50% grey layer in overlay mode, and then we can use a black or white brush just to basically burn or dodge. So with this image, what I'd probably look at is just bringing out the detail. Actually, that brush is too strong. Let's go down to maybe 20% roughly. So I'll just look at sort of highlighting some of the edges of these objects here, and just taking these parts of the rock here that are brighter than the grassy bits around them, and just brighten those, maybe down here a little bit. And yeah, if I was doing this for real, I would spend a lot more time making this a lot more accurate. But I think for the purpose of the video, just to show you the rough idea is gonna still help. And then yeah, so brightening some edges and then darkening some other edges. That's really dark. Let's go 10%, and then darkening some others. You know, that's helping create some sort of three-dimensionality, if that's a word. Yeah, it's just sort of helping to 3Dify some of these sort of bits that are sticking out. Let's have a look at the before and after there. So that's before, that's after. I don't really like what I've done down here, I'll undo that. As I said, I'd normally take a bit more time to do this, but this is the kind of thing that I would do. I'm sure I've got some videos on YouTube somewhere that talk about dodging and burning for detail. So yeah, check that out if you've literally got no idea what I'm doing here. But yeah, there's a video on YouTube I've got on my post-processing mastery channel that will kind of explain that in a bit more detail. But yeah, so dodging and burning, and then just some detail at the end. Maybe let's see what the sharpening method 1 button will do for us in the panel. So this sharpening method, it creates a high pass filter layer which is then applied on a overlay blend mode, so that gives us like a sharpening effect. And then I'll just invert the layer mask there because that starts out black, and then as well as that, to eliminate the halos that get created with that type of high pass sharpening effect, this process here also adds a luminosity mask to basically reduce those halos. So it's quite an effective sharpening technique. If I zoom in, you can see the effect that's had, just to make the detail pop a little bit more. But yeah, I think that's almost it. Let's just see one final thing. Let's see what the sun haze effect will give us. I'm not sure this is going to work because the colours might not quite match with the sort of the purpley red colours we've got here in the image. So I'll just run the sun haze filter, and the purpose of this is for creating an effect that makes it look like the sun is kind of leaking into the image. So I'm going to get a white brush on about 30% opacity, and because the sun is out of the frame here, I'm just going to start it and bring it in from the right, and then make it brighter on the right hand side. So now that I've done a couple of those brush strokes, I'll just reduce the effect. Doesn't look great. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Other things you can try if you want to give this a go is just changing the blend mode after you've made the effect to something like overlay or soft light. So I think that works a little bit better using either overlay or soft light. They both appear to look pretty much identical, those two. Actually, that's working really nicely, just to brighten that, to brighten the castle up there. Actually, I quite like that. Okay, so yeah, there was a bit of an accidental, or happy accident, I guess. But yeah, from here, I think I'm pretty happy with this, with how this has turned out. And yeah, really, the main purpose of this video was to show you the kind of the recovery of the shadowy middle ground, and just to sort of set that balance in those first couple of steps. And then yeah, as we continued, we've adjusted the color and added some contrast and just sort of tweaked the sort of the balance of what's light and what's dark, added some detail and some glowing effect from the autumn effect, bit of sharpening, bit of sun haze, and it's a pretty sweet shot, I think, now. Okay, right, so from this point, I've actually re-recorded the ending, because when I originally recorded and saved this video, I went back and just added one more adjustment to the image, which I really liked. So yeah, again, it's a bit of a lesson in processing, is that, you know, for me, I always like to go away and come back to an image, and sometimes I see things that I didn't see before. In this case, upon hitting that save button, and I was just saving a JPEG to use as the thumbnail for this video, I thought, I wonder what it would look like if it was a little bit brighter. And so I just added a curve adjustment, and I actually quite liked it. So I thought I would just redo the end of this video here and show you this version, which is a bit brighter. So yeah, again, it's a little bit sort of more pastel-y, it's not quite as deep and moody. And so really, again, this is, I guess, just a lesson in when you're processing your images, always take the time to go away and have a look or have a think and come back with a fresh mind and see if there's something else that you might like to try, or if the image still looks as good to you as it did before. For me, it only took a couple of seconds clicking away and then clicking back on the image to think, oh, I wonder what it would look like a bit brighter. I actually think I prefer this version, like I said, so this is the one that I'm going to sign off with. So with all those adjustments here, let's have a look at the before and after. So here's before. Got the dark middle, the bright foreground, and the beautiful sky, which doesn't really need much processing, to be honest. And let's add these adjustment layers back on. And there we go. Oh, actually, as well, I added another curves adjustment here just to darken the right hand side of the image, just because the sky was starting to overexpose. But again, that's just personal preference, something you might want to try or not. So yeah, like I said already, but you didn't hear it because I've edited the first ending of the video out. Thanks for watching. If if you haven't downloaded the panel and you want to get the panel, there's a button below the video where there's two buttons, one where you can use a credit card and one for PayPal, whichever you prefer. It's $97 to use the panel. You get free lifetime updates, so it's a one-off purchase. You get all the latest versions as I add to and improve the panel over the coming months and years, and whoever knows how long. But yeah, it's a one-time purchase. You get the panel now and you can use it for as long as it exists. And yeah, otherwise all the other techniques that I've shown you, all the techniques that the panel helps you do faster, you can still do them in Photoshop if you learn the techniques, the luminosity masking and whatnot. Just the panel helps you do it all quicker and more simply. So with that said, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Okay, cheers.